Hey everybody, I'm Ben and I stay home. I've been gone for a while, so if you're here with me today, thanks so much for being here. I'm doing something a little bit different. So I'll be doing some character design in Fallout 4 and talking about the learning I've been doing and the thinking I've been doing about anti-oppression, primarily through the lens of Nieto's addressing model and how that relates to sort of video game things and character design as I'm thinking about building a tabletop role-playing game, which is even more open than a video game. I wanted to do this process of looking at a robust character design and looking at which intersections are paid attention to, which intersections aren't. Is there anything the game is doing that Nieto doesn't have in her model? I've been thinking about anti-oppression things for a long time, and it's something that is in the back of my head, kind of running constantly. So thinking about how video games do the work is just sort of a natural process for me. So we'll be looking at those different things as we go through the game. So let's get into it. This is the Fallout 4 menu. I'm going to go through the new player sort of opening cinematics for people who might be new to Fallout 4. So I'll be quiet and let that play, and then I'll talk as I do the character design following that little opening cinematic. I hope that makes sense. But I'm very excited to play with this idea of how video games pay attention to various sort of intersections of identity and things like that. Here we go.
War. War never changes. In the year 1945, my great-great-grandfather, serving in the army, wondered when he'd get to go home to his wife and the son he'd never seen. He got his wish when the US ended World War II by dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world awaited Armageddon. Instead, something miraculous happened. We began to use atomic energy not as a weapon, but as a nearly limitless source of power. People enjoyed luxuries once thought the realm of science fiction. Domestic robots, fusion-powered cars, portable computers. But then, in the 21st century, people awoke from the American dream. Years of consumption led to shortages of every major resource. The entire world unraveled. Peace became a distant memory. It is now the year 2077. We stand on the brink of total war. And I am afraid. For myself, for my wife, for my infant son. Because if my time in the army taught me one thing, it's that war never changes.
Okay, now we'll get into the sort of character generation process.
You're gonna knock him dead at the Veterans Hall tonight, hun. Absolutely. Now get ready and stop hogging the mirror.
Okay, so here we are in character generation in Fallout 4. So you can see we can press a button to
My
switch
turn, big guy.
which player we're playing. So Nieto's addressing model very quickly is a way of looking at various intersections, right? So it's a question of looking at, so addressing ADDRESSING, where you're looking at age, disability status, which is sort of physical and developmental and things like that, diagnostic status, which is mental health, religion, ethnicity and race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, indigenous heritage, your nationality, and gender identity and expression. So what identities are in this game? What can we play? So right up the front, you can see we've got a very strict sort of gender binary that we're allowing in this game. So there's that right away. And you can see as we sort of cycle through, you can play a variety of sort of races. These are all presets that we can go in then and change. And there's something that's been talked about by a lot of creators of color with role-playing games, in particular tabletop role-playing games, that it may not be okay to have like white players playing characters of color, because why are you putting that on? Is that virtual blackface? What is that? And so that's something that I actually kind of cognizant of now. Even when I play video games, unless the character is chosen for me, I usually try and play a character about the same race. Now here you can see some age coming in. We can't play children. We're definitely playing adults through the game. So let's say I pick this preset right here, and I can start doing a male, so I can start scanning around. But we can see the gender binary is very present. So we can definitely set different ethnicities, different races, but then it becomes sort of the ethical question of what can you do, what can't you do. So now we can sculpt, and these games have gotten really really detailed. So you can see you're sculpting just the width of things. So you can really sort of set how your character looks and play with different presets. I'm going to go with a much narrower jaw area. I do want to change the facial hair because I'm not a big facial hair person. I'm going to get rid of all facial hair so I can really clearly see this face. And then I'm going to move around to a different area. Let's do the nose, because why not? I can sculpt that as well. So I can move the nose out, make it larger. I can move it in and make it smaller. And you can see you can really do a lot there. Like with L1, I can create some rotations where I change other aspects of the nose's shape. So you can see you can really do a lot with sort of these character designers. So we can play different ages. We can age and reduce the age of characters. Let's see if I can get kind of back into that. Let's see. So I am going to look at the faces are there. Let's go through the face. Let's look at extras and see what we can do there. So you can see I can change markings on the face. So I can remove moles or add moles. You can see that. So I can remove freckles and moles and make the complexion a little cleaner. We can look at blemishes and where things are. So I can turn off things like rough face and other blemishes. So as I do that, you can see that and there's huge lists of things you can change. Things have gotten really like very, very different in terms of like so detailed in video games what we can do now. But the question is, what is appropriate to play? What is not? So for me, as a non-binary person, I can't really represent myself in a detailed way, right, in this setup, because I don't fit. So I can see I've got no scars currently applied, which is great. These blemishes come off? They didn't. So you can see these things are done. I'm going to take off all these blemishes because I'm going to try and de-age myself as I'm playing through. So you can see as I pull off, because the skin changes, right, as it gets older. So we're going to accept that reduction of blemishes there. Is there any damage applied? No, there isn't. So as we work through this, we can really see that you can do a lot. Already he's looking younger. And then I can come into the face. Let's look at the hair. We can change the style of the hair. Let's do that first. And I wonder what kind of styles we can pick. So if we're looking at the ability to build a non-binary character, I have to start with either male or female automatically. So that's already sort of a limitation because Although we may be assigned these things, and what if I'm an intersex person? We could talk for a while just about the names: trailer smash, slick and sleazy. All these things are not great, but also these hairstyles are all pretty traditionally masculine. So we see gender coming up. Sexual orientation as represented in this game. As you can see, I can't create a character that starts out this game as a gay man or as a lesbian, and it doesn't seem like I'm able to play with gender, so it all becomes really... this alpha male one is interesting, and what does that mean? But you can see all of these different sort of hairstyles are all still, like, based on their names, are still pretty traditionally masculine, even the longer ones. So I don't have the option even to choose a more feminine hairstyle for my character, which is interesting. So let's say I keep this hairstyle. I'm going to change the color as well. I can really only pick natural hair colors in this game, which is also another piece. So I'm somebody who, as I've sort of acknowledged and owned my queerness a little more, I like to change the color of my hair. So here I'm only allowed to choose colors that are natural, mostly. But you can see how if I pick, some of these hair colors, I look older. Whereas if I pick other ones, if I go closer to what my natural color was when I was younger, for myself, you can see there I am doing that. Now we'll go to the forehead. So it's a really detailed, and here's the aging piece, right? So I'm de-aging myself just by playing through some of these things. And so here I'm going to come through this whole face area, and let's see. I don't want to have any facial hair. Let's see if I can sculpt. I think this is really just shape now, right? So I can create a longer or shorter face. So you really can create a really wide variety of looks. So I think that ethnicity can be represented in different ways, but you're still playing with sort of genetic averages when you're doing these things. But you have a lot of flexibility in terms of what you're doing. So you can see I'm doing a lot of stuff, but you can really come around, and there's areas, and I don't know where all the areas are because I haven't spent a lot of time with this, but again, I can choose, what I want this to look like in terms of the style. Do I want to be muscular, wrinkled, rashed, oily? So you can play with age. So I would say that's well represented. Now, disability status you also can't do in this game, right? There's no way to play a disabled character. But again, if you're playing a disabled character, what does that mean, and why are you choosing to, if you're not a disabled person, why are you choosing to play a disabled character? You can see the lips again. You can do lots of different things with it, and so different ones look older or younger. So already by picking those lips, I've reduced my age a little bit again. And here I am again, I'm sculpting really, really specific things on the face to create a really custom look. So you really can make your character who you want it to be, except you can't pick a character that is disabled in some way. You can't play a non-binary character. You can't, so ethnicity and race totally represented. Indigenous heritage does not play into this game. It's representing the American majority. Nationality, you've served in the American military. You are that. So I'm gonna leave this face and move along to setting up the female's face. You're clearly a homeowner in this game, so you can see that we've also are representing, this is a higher socioeconomic status. This is middle class or above, for sure. And again, you can represent a wide variety of skin tones in the game. That's really well represented. So you can see that they're playing with representation, but they're missing some pieces under Nieto's model, which is really quite interesting. So they're hitting the mark in some of these, but not others. Now, for me, being white the way that I am, I tend to feel, if I'm going to play a character of color, I've started to ask myself that question: why am I choosing that? For the purpose of this, which is also a public forum, I'm not going to be putting on the look of a person of color, because I don't want to feel like I'm doing digital blackface, something like that, for views or anything like that. So I'm going to choose to play white characters for that reason. And you can see, so I can add cheek creases and make my character seem a little bit older because of that. Maybe I want them to be sun-scorched, maybe I don't. I can make their eyes a little more gaunt. You can see they're not looking too healthy when you do that, so you can make somebody, so you can play with those kinds of things. So I could say to myself, as a person who's diagnosed with anxiety and depression, if my anxiety is really bad and I'm not sleeping, you know, what would that do? Would I have bags under my eyes? Would there be things like that? You know, so maybe I'm not as well slept because, you know, things are tough right now. I don't like that they call these splotches, because it looks like it represents like people's actual conditions. Afternoon, Better Man. Nice to see you. I'm just talking for an assignment. This is for one of my university assignments in anti-oppressive education. So I'm just going through some things with Fallout 4 and how that works. But I wanted to share it because it's the thinking that I do now all the time. So I'm gonna make my character, you know, a little less well slept. You know, maybe represent some of the anxiety I carry. And I'll probably play a female character. I tend to choose those in these kinds of games. You can see you can set up some scars, some crazy scars, which I don't want to do. I'll put a, you know, brow scar on this person. So you can do lots of things in this game, and it really does play with intersections. But you can see the age is limited in terms of legal systems, right? We only have children that have different legal rights where we are. But you can certainly see that you can represent someone who looks a little bit older. Disability status is not represented in this game. So if I was coming in as a person with a disability, a physical disability, I can't play that. Now there are invisible disabilities like autism that maybe I could choose to play my character in a way that felt like that as a person with autism. But it's not something that I can just do in this game. Like, it's not there. So that's something I got to think about. Diagnostic status, again, that's something I guess I could apply as a player, but it's not something built into the character. So I'm gonna look for another, and you can see these haircuts again, very traditionally feminine haircuts. So what does that mean in terms of what the game is saying about gender? So you can see that. In terms of religion, the game doesn't really tackle it, and I can see why a game doesn't tackle something like that, because they want to leave it sort of open. So it's a very secular game. So if you wanted your character to be religious, it doesn't really fit. In an earlier version of the game, of course, there was a religion that worshipped a nuclear bomb, which you could question as well. So all of these haircuts are pretty traditionally feminine. So I'm going to look for one that's a little more neutral, because I can't play a non-binary character in this game. So that's something I need to think about. Ethnicity and race I've talked about a lot. You can see that it's pretty well represented, but again, what am I doing if I choose to play a black character as a white player, especially if it's going to be in any kind of public forum? And why am I making that choice? So I tend to play white characters for that reason. I'm just going to go with the simple hair pulled back, I guess, is what I'm going to do. I'm going to change the color. And again, you can see it's all sort of natural hair colors, so you can't express yourself through hair color that are non-natural hair colors in the way this game is designed, which is interesting. Socioeconomic status. Sexual orientation, again, it's very rigid in terms of how you're designing your character in this one. It's setting up a system where it's a husband and wife, so they're definitely, you know, a straight couple. So there's not a lot of options there. Now, once you get into the game, of course, you'll meet lots of characters and you can kind of do whatever you want with your character. Yeah, I've wondered how they would do character creation as well, Better Man, who's saying that, you know, I've wondered how Bethesda, the company that makes this game, will handle character customization in an upcoming game. I wonder too. I was going through all of my games trying to pick a game to use for this assignment, and I ended up landing on this game, but I also went through character generation again in Dragon Age Inquisition, which is a lot of face construction. And so in that game, you still have to choose whether you're male or female, but once you're in the sort of head design, and you can't design the body in that game, but once you're in head design, I had set up a female character, but I could still add an Adam's apple to that character. And in a male character, you can get rid of the Adam's apple. So you can like quietly sort of transcode your character, but it's still sort of in a binary way. So it's interesting. I don't want to spend a really long time in all the little details of the face, but you really can do a lot of specific things in the details of this face. So if we go in and just set a few things, like if I come to the mouth, say, I can go into upper lip, I can go into lower lip. It's really quite specific. So I can go into the type of So here we're getting into sort of face pieces, sort of mouth bottom, and this is where you're starting to see a lot more face customization. You can see where you can add age if you want to. But socioeconomic status, I've mentioned already, you're up there, right? It's really up there in terms of how much money you have, and we'll get into that a little bit as well in the game. This is not a super happy game, but I always tend to give myself like not a really negative face. So you can see like there's just the number of lips you can set is pretty huge. And it changes aspects of the face as well. So I'm gonna pick I like this idea of an average mouth. What is an average mouth? So I'll pick this just so we can see that. So you can see how you can go through lots and lots of settings. You can set like even right down to eyelids, the bottom of the eyelids and things like that. Or what are we doing for other eyelids or eyes in general? So I can set up, these are prominent eyes. Do I want to have tired eyes? And since I've set the bags under the eyes, I'm going to set tired eyes as well. But Indigenous heritage is not dealt with at all in this game. They don't talk about indigeneity in any way, shape, or form. So it's just not, it's not in the radar. So again, that's another intersection it sort of doesn't address. And then looking at nationality, you're definitely like American, but it's a play on America. It's making a bit of a critique of American society to start with. So I could see that. And now here we are. Now I'm gonna go into the body section because this is interesting. I've talked through the addressing model where you absolutely can customize the age, but you can't play a child because you have a child. It would be a strange sort of game to do that, but you can age yourself, which is fairly common in most of these games. You won't be treated differently based on how you customize your character, which is nice. Disability is not recognized, your diagnosis, only if you play it. Religion, they kind of keep out of the game, which I can understand why a secular public game would do that. There are certainly games out there that explore ideas of religion, but this one ignores it. Ethnicity and race, lots of customization. You could do lots of things to create a variety of features, from skin tone to facial features and shapes, things like that. Sexual orientation is quite rigid in game design, which is too bad, but that's the system that we're in for this game. Socioeconomic status, you can see we're starting high, but we will be getting post-apocalyptic, so economy will change drastically. But in terms of who the characters' lives were before the apocalypse, you can see socioeconomic status is pretty good. You can see a little robot flying around in the background. They have a house robot. Indigeneity is not explored in this game at all. Nationality we've talked about, and gender identity and expression is quite traditional, as you can see at the start of this game. But the one thing that this game does that other games are doing now that Nieto doesn't talk about is the idea of body size. And so you can set your size up, and it's not the most natural looking body size, like the face doesn't change with it. You can set yourself in this triangle between muscular and large and thin, and you can see it does make differences in how the body looks as you come in, and you can kind of set yourself anywhere you want in this triangle. And so you will be treated no differently if you're large than if you're not large, which is good. I've wondered when I was going through this process, like why doesn't Nieto in her work look at body size or fat phobia as a metric of intersectionality? It is something we talk about, and the only thing I can think of that sort of sets the reason for that would be that I don't know of any countries that have legislation against people based on body size. So that could be why she's chosen to ignore that particular intersection, although social treatment, things like that, totally come into play when it comes to body size. But I'm assuming Nieto's looking at areas because there is legislation against people based on age, disability status, diagnostic status, religion, ethnicity and race, either historically or currently, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, indigenous heritage, nationality, gender identity, and expression. All of these things have legislation attached to them. So I wonder if that's either historically or currently have legislation connected to marginalization. So I wonder if we're looking at these sort of target and agent categories specifically through the lens of sort of legal aspects when we're making this list. So if I call myself done here, we can see, okay, I'm going to choose to play this female character rather than the male one we designed, and we're going to go through. So you can see as we're in this house and as we get the chance to walk around in this house, we've officially sort of designed our character in terms of the physical appearance. But this house, you can see, like, it's a nice, very 50s style. That's the look of the game. But you can see they've got a nice little laundry room. You know, they've got their bedroom looking pretty good. They've got, you know, the nursery where their child is as well. And so socioeconomic status, you can see these folks are reasonably well off. You know, they've got their house robot who's serving them, which is, you know, it's interesting because they're talking. They totally have sentience. So the question then becomes, is a sentient robot that you buy and is working for you, where's that line for humanity? And is that an intersection worth considering as well? These games also in the post-apocalypse have characters called ghouls that have been affected by the nuclear attacks that are equivalent to sort of zombies, but some of them are feral and don't think, some of them are sentient, and do they have a space? Do they have community? So he's got his own paper. He's going to read that and talk about that as the game moves on. But I just find it interesting the way that games play with them. Like if I was building a tabletop role-playing game, I could choose, because there's so many fewer limits, to represent or have any of these aspects represented. But how do you talk to a white player who's playing a black character, and really ask those questions about why are you making that choice? What's the purpose behind choosing a marginalized identity you don't hold, whether that's race, whether that's disability status, because in some cases these are things that don't change over the course of your life. You don't come to understand you're a different race, right? Whereas gender is a place where people might play. I tend to choose female characters, and now I understand part of that was because I was exploring my own gender identity through the way I played these games. So I did often choose to play female characters. So I wonder, you know, why. This is all technically still character generation. This is all introduction. So now we're going to meet this Vault Tech rep who's going to ask me a bunch of questions, and that's going to help set some of my other abilities. So it's just, I wonder, you know, like gender, someone might want to play with things and decide to play with the idea of gender as a way of exploring themselves. But in other intersections, you know, I wonder, how does it work? And I've listened to those players of color and content creators of color who have said, please, if you're not a person of color, don't play a person of color, because it's sort of this virtual blackface if it's a video game, or tabletop sort of imaginary blackface, that's still damaging. So I try not to do it. I would discourage it from players if I was running a game. So it's interesting. So I look at this game and I wonder, so here we are again. These are the special is their acronym for the various features you can have, and you have 21 points to spend. So here you're setting up, and again, it's not connected to any of your intersections, which I find very interesting, right? These are sort of your innate abilities, and they are not connected, and it would be terrible if they were, but it's not connected to the way you designed the body of your character specifically. It's not connected to race, which is super good. That would be really, really problematic. Hopefully that game would fail. But you can see that no matter how you do visual design of your character, including body size, you can set your abilities wherever you want them. And you could choose to dump a whole bunch of points into strength and be super good, or you can choose to be sort of a more balanced character and do as you see fit, right? But you can't, and you can be completely balanced at 4 across the board. Most people don't do that. So I might choose to be like a little less strong, but maybe a little more perceptive, or my endurance isn't as great, but I'm a little more lucky. You probably don't leave anything at 1. So this is your character design, is also setting these sort of physical and mental attributes but it's totally divorced from your physical design, which is a good thing, because if you connected those things, you'd be getting into bioessentialism, which would be highly problematic. So when I look at these, I'm really thinking, and I do every time I design a character now, in a video game or in another game, I'm thinking, how am I going to represent the various intersections of this character? How is the game world going to respond to that? Now, in the case of a video game, generally the way you design your character, the world doesn't respond any differently. But when I think about tabletop role-playing games, it's different. You know, how is it going to be? How are people going to respond to me based on my race? And in games like Dungeons and Dragons, we've seen players represented. Why can't I accept this? That's weird. Oh, I must name my character before proceeding. That's right. You also name your character however you want. So I'm gonna pick a name that is, and this is as close as you can get to sort of being non-binary, is I'm choosing to choose a masculine name like Gerald for my presenting female character. So you could sort of do that, but other than that, there's not a lot of options. So I wonder about how a tabletop role-playing game, like if I choose to play a character that is disabled, what does that mean? But what does it mean? Why am I choosing to do that? Is it a political thing? What's the choice there? So I wonder about that. But if somebody at my table was wheelchair bound and they chose for their character to be wheelchair bound in a tabletop role-playing game, then the question is, how does the world respond to that? Do I make sure I design a world that is fully accepting of that, to, you know, make it not a barrier where it is a barrier in their real life? Or do they want to like expose the barriers? I'd have to have a conversation with that player, and those are things video games can't do. So they tend to, I think they tend to ignore those intersections. One, it would make design a lot more complicated, but also it would be questionable how do they deal with it, right? Because they'd have to make those decisions without talking to the players ahead of time, because you can't talk to the player and adjust the game on the fly the way you can at a real table. So that's the character design of Fallout 4. Looking at the addressing model from Nieto, I hope that made sense. It might be a little bit scattered, but that's what streaming live is to a certain extent. This is a really short video stream for today, but I just wanted to sort of get into the sort of real basic aspects of, as you build a character, the designers of your game are looking at these various intersections, and they're choosing to represent some and not represent others. And then I think it's worthwhile to ask why. Why are they representing some things and not others? How well are they representing them? In other games, you don't choose who your character is at all. You're just given a character in lots of games, right? I'm also playing through an Assassin's Creed game right now where, you know, you play Ezio Auditore, who's a person from Italy during that time period, and the game takes place in Italy. So then the question would be, what things are historically accurate? What things are they playing on? Are there, you know, tropes of that particular nationality represented that may or may not be accurate? You know, there's things like that come up in games even when you're not choosing your character. They're creating that for you. So it's a question then of how do they interact with each other? So I'm just very interested in how those things play out in various games. So this is Fallout 4, one specific game with pretty robust character design. It's been out for, you know, a few years now. It's been out for a while, but a lot of my games are not brand new. So just something to think about is, as you go into video games and you're designing characters, particularly in these big RPGs that have robust character design, what are they including? What are they not including? Why are they not including it? I'm thinking about the Mass Effect games. I went into the first Mass Effect game to design that as well, and just like Dragon Age, that's a game where you can only design the face. The body of your character is set. So why are they doing that? Are they doing that because of the wireframes being more complicated, or it becomes more complicated to make the various like pieces of armor fit different body shapes? Couldn't they just scale the images? So we have some games that are doing this sort of triangle that we're seeing of body types. We're seeing other games that don't do that work. Most games are really good at representing a variety of facial structures and races and ethnicities now. But we see a lot of things are ignored in a lot of video games. And the question is why? Does it not matter to the designers? Do they not think about it? Do they ignore it because it makes the design more complicated? I mean, I would love to see a role-playing game, a video role-playing game, where you can choose to play a disabled character and it doesn't hinder the character's success or function in the game, where you can explore those issues. It would also be interesting to see a game that's designed to explore issues of oppression and anti-oppression that's got a degree of separation from the actual intersections of oppression in our society, which is what I'll hopefully be doing in my written work for this course, where I'm working to design more of the front matter for a tabletop role-playing game for educational settings, where people will be able to play with issues of oppression with a little bit of separation from real life oppression in a way that hopefully feels a little bit safer to explore those issues through an anti-oppressive lens. But that's my time for today. Thanks so much for being here today. Again, I'm Ben and I stay home. If you're liking this content or you're curious about who I am or what's going on, please check out my website at benstayshome.com. I am hoping to start being online again and doing some Twitch streaming and things a little more again, but I just need a little bit of distance from the stuff that's out there right now in the cozy gaming space around Hogwarts Legacy. That's a real stressor point for me, so I haven't been around as much. I am hoping to be back at some point. But thanks so much for being here with me, for staying home with me, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks so much, and goodbye.